Series win north of the border for the Cubs over the weekend. We talk about that and more straight ahead.
You are Locked On Cubs, your daily Chicago Cubs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Alongside Sam Olber, I'm Matt Cozy. Please support the show by following on your preferred audio platform, and you can watch, subscribe, and leave a comment on YouTube. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. Sam and I are lifelong fans, taking our passion into a discussion with you on all things Cubs. Today's Monday episode is presented by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed with Game Time. We report to you whenever and wherever you may be listening as the Cubs continue their playoff push by winning this series in Toronto. 2-1 over the Blue Jays, a 6-2 win Friday, 5-4 win Saturday, and an 11-4 loss on Sunday. Cubs are 61-57, and we will check the standings later in the episode. Sam, it was a good weekend in Cubs land, and we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, and it was a busy weekend in Olberland because for the first time in a long time, I really didn't get a chance to lock in on back-to-back Cubs games. Friday night, you and I had an event we attended. Right. Saturday, I had a different event. And then on Sunday, you and I watched the game together, which usually means a loss, and that's what happened.
I'd like to officially, and it pains me to say this. I'm not even trying to perform.
Yeah.
We will not watch another Cubs game together this year.
Well, we might be at one next weekend.
No, and I'll be in a different section because, I think we're over.
I don't think they've won a game we've watched together.
The last time I saw a win with you was, I think, like April 2021. Jake Arrieta beat the Pirates.
Yeah, we don't do well together.
When he made his comeback that one year with the Cubs.
I remember that game. We talked to a waiter a lot that day.
Yeah.
Like a bartender or something.
Right.
Yeah, look, it was a very good weekend, don't you think?
Oh, it was great.
And going into it, the goal was, hey, make sure you don't get swept. Okay.
Yeah, we talked about winning one game.
And that's why I said on Friday, I kind of jabbed at you. I said, screw that, okay?
Yeah, you were right.
Winning one game. And they won two, and they really had a chance to sweep on Sunday.
Right.
And look, I understand that you're going to wake up and it's on this Monday morning or Monday afternoon, whenever you're listening, you're going to say, okay, well, they're actually now not even in the wild card technically, and they are 3.5 back. But guys and gals, they just finished a very difficult part of their schedule. They played the Bravos. Going to Citi Field's never easy. And then they just went north of the border and took a series in Toronto. Now, and I mean now, is the time where you start to flex your muscles. Now is the time where Milwaukee goes up, and we'll talk about this, but
especially for Tuesday's episode.
You've done your job, and you should be proud of that. And even though the margin back may not look great right now, it's going to look good pretty soon.
Yeah, I personally believe the margin looks fine. Yeah, we're going to update it later in the show. And then for Tuesday's episode, we'll go over this next stretch of games for the Cubs, Brewers, and I guess the Reds, respectfully. But I feel good about this team right now. I personally believe you don't want to play the Cubs right now.
No.
They beat the Braves 2 out of 3. Yeah, we could talk about Wednesday's contest, and we did against the Mets, sure. But then you win 2 out of 3 against the Blue Jays, and you have some storylines. I'm a sucker for a story, and you have things that keep popping up that are very exciting. And this weekend, I think the biggest one, Sam, was Javier Assad.
I think you're right.
7 innings, 4 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, 2 strikeouts on 90 pitches on Friday night. And he barely broke a sweat.
Yep.
They won decisively Friday to lead off a series in which, maybe mistakenly we said, hey, 1 win is the goal. They won.
I didn't say that.
They won 1 game in the top of the first, basically.
Yeah.
With a 3-0 lead right away, right off the bat. So in a rotation right now where Stroman's on the IL, Hendricks is struggling, Smiley got moved to the pen, uncertainty perhaps about Tyone, and of course Steele is a linchpin. But there is questions about the rotation. For Assad to step up like he did is massive.
Massive. And I would say that in addition to the Assad storyline, I think the general storyline of the weekend, in a way, is that Milwaukee and the Cubs, and I still think the Reds should be discussed. I think, but in the Milwaukee's case, both held serve in the opposite regard. Milwaukee beat up on bad teams, and the Cubs, I would even say the Cubs were a little bit of a plus. They hung in there against good teams plus. I know they lost 2 out of 3, because if you think about it, that 9-game stretch against the Braves, Mets, and Jays, in your head, you're thinking 2 of 3 lost to the Braves, 2 of 3 win against the Mets, 2 of 3 lost to the Blue Jays. It went the opposite.
Right.
And so you actually probably were a game better than you should have been in that stretch. And, Milwaukee was probably right about where they should have been during their stretch. And now, like we said, it's going to flip. But to me, when you look at the Cubs right now, I think every single person, whether you're a Cub fan, Brewer fan, Red fan, I think we all know who the best team in the division is. Now, the question is can the Cubs just go out there and make up 3.5 games and do what I think they're capable of doing, win 12 out of 15 again and start to run away from this, because they dug themselves some holes, as we've talked about. And so they're not in the best possible spot, but they're still in a good one. And, you mentioned Assad. I think Kwas has been a nice story here.
Oh, it's been great.
That game on Saturday where I was at a friend's daughter's baptism, where we all were, and this was at the reception. We all had our phones. We were watching live during kind of like the music was going, and
hopefully a slower time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really was just thinking to myself, Leiter Jr. comes in, he gives up a run. It's like, okay, you're in trouble. And then Merriweather again is like starting to have another hot stretch. And then they score the run, and then Alzolay just another no drama effort from him.
I personally feel really good about the pen right now, and I think Kwas might be the addition to the so-called circle of trust for Ross.
Yeah, I just
he give you 5 guys that you could go to.
Look, we all know the Cubs have 2 glaring issues right now, in my opinion. They don't have a lefty to get anybody out except Leiter Jr. late in the game, and it feels like they're a starter short. But again, I caution people that 2 years ago, the Cubs had a massive sell-off. 2 years later, we are now in a pennant race. They're not going to be a perfect team. They're not as good as the Atlanta Braves. They're probably not as good as the Los Angeles Dodgers. Right. But they're right there right now with everybody else in the NL. And, what else could you say about that?
They might be the 3rd best team in the NL.
And I don't disagree, but it's on them now to go really put an exclamation point on that.
100%. And I'm excited to really move mountains about that, you might say, on for Tuesday's show. Alzolay is etching his identity as a closer. I mean, to be in English, to use some adjectives, some verbiage there.
Vocabulary.
He is fit for the part. And again, that's something that you called back in February. And, they were able to figure out his role, and he wins the big moment and is helping the team win. And I'm interested to see with Kwas now, maybe an elevated spot in the pen. Big 3-run homer by Swanson Saturday. Big go-ahead double by Morel on Saturday. Bellinger stays hot. And then you win Friday, Saturday, Sam. And then he doesn't play Sunday, and he didn't play Wednesday as well. So I just wanted to update the Mike Tauchman record when he starts and leads off to segue into our next segment.
Yeah.
The Cubs are now 25-11 when Tauchman starts and leads off. 14 games over 500.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And coming up next, we're going to get into some lineups because, dude, I have a quote in front of me from David Ross on August 3rd. He's not living that out as much as I thought he would, as much as he said he would.
Wow, shocking.
And we're going to do that coming up next. Today's episode is presented by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you, with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. The Cubs return to Wrigley Field this week, 2 against the White Sox, and then 3 against the Royals. Good matchups to get some tickets to as the summer starts to come to a close, really, here in August. And good for the Cubs to be back at home, and you can still catch the Cubs at the friendly confines. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. To download Game Time today for last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed with Game Time. The Cubs play the White Sox at 7:05 p.m. Central Tuesday, and you can listen to every pitch with the Cubs hometown broadcast on SiriusXM. On the SXM app, search Cubs, or tune into channel 844 and catch the Cubs all season long on SiriusXM. Here's a quote from manager David Ross on August 3rd. Quote, "Right now, you got to put your ego aside. We're not trying to fit in everybody's at-bats and get everybody at-bats. We're trying to win every single game at all costs," close quote. Friday and Saturday's lineup, it seemed apparent that maybe this team and their manager moved their glasses to the playoff lens. But then you see the Sunday lineup and the decisions, plural, in game.
Yeah.
And you do wonder about some of that.
Well, I don't think it's about, Matt, them not trying. I think it's just they have this miscalculated idea versus left-handed pitchers.
Okay.
Versus David Peterson, we didn't like the lineup. Versus Ryu, we didn't like the lineup. This idea for Ross that he has to fit in Wisdom and Amaya and these guys against lefties, and then today you sit Tauchman and you sit Candelario, but Tauchman's the one that just doesn't make sense because he's hit lefties almost at the same level that he's hit righties. And so, and by the way, the record supports it. The Cubs have not been good against left-handed pitching in the second half. It's a total opposite of what it was in the first half. And I just think, like today, for example, I just thought, again, the Cubs probably lose this game regardless. But both games that the Cubs, the last 2 games they've lost, have just been managed really, just poorly, right? Wisdom's playing a position he doesn't play, first base. He botches a ball that he should have caught, leads to a huge inning. Wisdom, before he hits a 2-run homer late in the game against the guy that he's supposed to be in there for, the matchup against Ryu, he goes 0 for 2 with 2 strikeouts, okay? Then, clearly Tyone doesn't have it. You have Killian ready to go, and he tries to stretch Tyone through an extra part of the lineup another time through, and that's where the game gets away. It's just and you have a day off on Monday. So it's just very sloppy managing, I thought, again. Guys need time. So like Candelario, I get it. He needed a day off, and why not get him a day off on his worst side of the plate? Tauchman did not have a good first 2 games of this series, fine. But I just hope that he starts to rethink this lefty thing, because the Cubs have a pretty good offense right now that's humming. And the fact that they've played however many games, you said it last week, and have had how many different lineups, it's it's almost exhausting. Like
Absolutely.
it's just unnecessary. I'm glad we haven't seen Barnhart since the mid '90s. And that's nice, but
It has been a while.
and it should be, but it's, it just didn't have a great vibe from the beginning. And then Swanson gets the 2-run double. You feel good. And at the end of the day, they lost the game because Tyone had no idea where the ball was going. But
right.
I just think he's overdoing it. This whole idea of Bellinger with all righties, it just throw in Talkman and let it be. Yeah, it's just unnecessary. And the last thing, I know Suzuki had a nice trip. I'll say it because people think that you don't like him, and I just think you're fair to him. I don't think one good game should have made him an everyday player again.
Since when does that happen in baseball?
That's not. Seiya Suzuki is at his best when he's rested mentally and physically. Use him that way. I don't want to see him in the lineup against Clevenger on Tuesday night. I think Nick Madrigal's earned the right. He's been better for longer. Get him some tick or play Candelario third, and you could DH. You don't have to play him every day because he's made $100 million and had 4 hits. I will let you know when I think Seiya Suzuki is earned back an everyday slot in this lineup.
Yeah, and I actually didn't mind the lineups Friday, Saturday with basically Madrigal out and Suzuki in. But the lefty matchup lineup thing has to stop. I tweeted out from I just want to echo that. I tweeted out from the show account before Sunday's game, hey, would this really be the lineup against lefties in a playoff game? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I am looking at this through a playoff lens now.
Well, they're all playoff games.
There's 44 games left. In my mind, they're making a push to the playoffs, a push to maybe raise a division banner if they want to do it.
Not maybe.
And so I see some responses, or I could hear some defenses of, well, hey, Matt, it's a Sunday game in August. Yeah, because the calendar says that.
With a day off Monday.
But because of what you all did before and earlier in the season, and you dug yourself the hole, and now you made a great response, you need to keep the foot on the gas, especially if there's an off day built in, and there's 2.
No, this and I'm glad
Monday, Thursday.
And I'm glad we touched on that because you have to use those to an advantage and sell out around those off days because you have a built-in day where you don't have to use anybody.
Because otherwise, I'm going to have to keep reading this quote like I'm in a class. We're trying to win every single game at all costs. Well, no, you're not. Because of what happened Wednesday and Sunday this past week.
Yeah.
Don't say that unless you're going to follow through. And maybe there is a one-off where there's a, quote, Sunday lineup. But again, with 44 contests to go, I don't think you can afford a Sunday lineup or a day before an off day lineup or a lefty righty. You got to play the best players. Yeah. I thought Friday and Saturday was trending that way, and then a little bit of a hiccup Sunday. So we'll see, especially against righties this week.
I just think David Ross thinks that's his best group against lefties for the most part. That's what I think.
All right. Fine.
And I just don't. I think it's categorically incorrect.
Right. Coming up next, we're going to do a check at the standings in this push to the playoffs, both division and wild card in the NL. Stay tuned. We're back here on Locked On Cubs. Thanks for making us your first listen, and thank you so much to the everydayers who reached out over the weekend. Had a blast responding to everybody on Sunday night. Took me a while, which was a good problem to have. And I at least liked everybody's comment, and I wrote back to about 95% of them. So,
wow,
really appreciate that. It was great to see. And, please keep tuning in and tell a friend about us as well. Cubs are 3.5 games back of the Brewers for first place in the NL Central, and they are a half game back in the third wild card spot, which the Marlins have.
Oh.
And then just to be thorough here, they're 2 games back at the second spot, the Giants, and 3.5 of the first wild card spot, the Phillies. Reds, Diamondbacks, and Padres, all within 5.5 games of the third wild card spot and remain in contention, I would say, at this stage as well. Sam, what stands out here as we approach this upcoming week?
Well, the two things that stand out is I think the Cubs are a much better team than the Marlins, and they're ahead of them, and I think that's going to eventually be a. I truly believe that as this plays out, it's going to be. Are the Cubs going to be in the third or second wild card spot, or are they going to win the division? I really think they have a very good path here. And we'll talk about it for tomorrow's show, how important that path is, but they've done a lot of heavy lifting to get here. I mean, you look at their second half, they split Red Sox Nats. I get it. The Cardinals are not great, but they're still the Cardinals. And then the Sox, okay, fine. But then they take care of business against the Reds. They take care of business against Atlanta. They just took care of business against Toronto. They slipped up against the Mets. And now you look up and it's like people were getting on them when they won 8 in a row, when they beat the Cardinals and the Sox. Well, now you're going to face just as easy, if not way easier. So I think they're in a very good spot. And I think it's almost like, in a way, let everything play out. Now it's just time to take care of your own business. See if you getting Stroman back Wednesday and seeing him pitch at a high level is imperative. They need somebody else to drag this team across the finish line from the starting rotation perspective. And then offensively, just more of the same. And the wins are going to start to chalk up, and it's going to be a hell of a month.
Next stretch of 12 games for the Cubs and the next stretch of games for the Brewers and Reds will be on tap for Tuesday's show, plus a prospects discussion, namely Pete Crow Armstrong and whether or not he could be promoted in September when rosters expand. So a fun week of shows. Also going to have a show announcement later in the week for Friday. And
big announcement.
This could be just a huge week for the Northsiders. And I do think they're going to take care of business, Sam. So I'm very excited.
I agree with you, Mateo.
All right. Shout out to the everydayers who are with us all 5 episodes throughout the week. And you can become an everydayer by checking us out each and every weekday. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for Locked On Cubs on YouTube. And smash the like button for the algorithm, Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast, and streaming on SiriusXM. He's Sam Olber. I'm Matt Cozy. This is Locked On Cubs.